Hi, I'm Reverend Jake Sabe, and welcome to Children's Bible Stories. Alright children, welcome to another lot of children's church history stories. This is going to be another story in our Children's Dragon Story series. This is going to be a story about dragons and Vikings. Particularly, we're going to focus on the Viking raid at Lindisfarne in England. And today, helping with this video is my assistant acolyte Heinrich.
Hello.
The first ever Viking attack happened in 787 when at the port of Devon there was the royal official who was there, and his job was to collect tax from sailors and traders. And he saw a boat coming, and he didn't realize that this boat was carrying Vikings, which is another word for pirate, and these were raiders. And they arrived there, and he asked them for their taxes, and they promptly killed him. Several years later, there was another incident in 789 when off the coast of Wessex there were 3 ships of Northmen that were sailing by. And the king had sent an official to go and welcome these strangers and bring them to the king to meet the king, not realizing that they were Viking raiders who, again, when they landed, killed the official and raided the countryside and stole whatever they could. So the raid at Lindisfarne was not the first Viking raid to take place, but it was one of the most devastating, and it did begin the period known as like the Viking era. Now, this then is when the story of the dragons comes in. So, according to the Doomsday Tablet, which was kind of the account of the Lindisfarne raid, they write that in the year 793, there were dreadful warnings in the land of Northumbria foretelling of something bad coming. The chronicler writes that there were these amazing sheets of lightning through the sky, and there was whirlwinds and tornadoes seen, and they saw even dragons flying through the sky. And not just dragons, but fire-breathing dragons. So we don't know exactly what these creatures were. They may have been little pterodactyls or little pterosaurs, because they were flying reptiles that could breathe fire. Now, the dragons themselves didn't harm the monks in the monastery. However, the monks saw this as a bad sign. There was terrible thunderstorms, there was big whirlwinds, and even fire-breathing dragons, and they thought, this can't be good. Something bad is going to happen. After this, there was a great famine, and then the famine was soon followed by the arrival of Vikings at Lindisfarne. And so the Vikings came, and they landed at Lindisfarne. And as I said, this was not the first Viking raid, but it was one of the most devastating. For you see, children, in the first 2 Viking raids, the Vikings attacked royal officials. In this account, they attacked monks. They killed monks, they took some as prisoners, they attacked the monastery, and this was something very unusual and scary. For you see, children, the Christians were used to fighting pagans. Throughout Germany, the Christians had fought pagans time and time again. We've heard about how the Christians interacted with these violent pagans. But one thing that the Vikings did different is that the pagans often had a fear of the Christian God. They didn't necessarily believe in the Christian God, or at least they didn't believe it was the only God, but the Germanic pagans had a high respect for sacred land. They usually didn't attack priests and monks and monasteries and churches. Now, of course, there are some occasions when they did, as we hear about in the account of St. Boniface, but usually places like monasteries were considered sacred land and the pagan Germans wouldn't attack them. But the Vikings had no reverence. They did not care about the sacredness of the monasteries, and they didn't care about the monks being holy men of God. They would attack and kill and kidnap monks and nuns and priests and whoever they wanted. And that's why the Vikings became some of the most scary enemies of God, because they not only attacked kings and soldiers and civilians, they also attacked monasteries and churches and monks and nuns and priests. And so that, children, then, is the story of the raid at Lindisfarne and the threat of the Vikings. I've been your host, Reverend Jake Zabel. Thanks again to my acolyte Heinrich for helping. Goodbye and God bless.